I want to welcome everybody to Iowa Postgame with Coach Gary Close here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. The Iowa Hawkeyes falling this evening or this afternoon to the Ohio State Buckeyes in Columbus, a place that's always a difficult place to travel to and play at, Gary. But this was a Buckeye team that was on a 5-game losing streak. The Hawkeyes had, of course, won 4 straight, had kind of had an extended break due to the game on Wednesday against Northwestern being postponed. We know the defensive struggles. We're going to talk about those, of course. But first of all, what did you see from Ohio State that offensively was a lot better than we've seen showcased from the Buckeyes recently?
Yeah, no doubt. As you mentioned, this was a desperate team. They had lost 5 in a row, and I don't think Iowa matched their desperation. I don't think waiting around for a week didn't help either. I think they probably would have been better off, playing that game against Northwestern. But that's just an excuse. They were soundly beaten. I think it's one of the more disappointing losses of the year, in that especially in the second half, they really had no answers, and just didn't feel they matched their intensity. And they had to know they're playing a desperate team. They couldn't afford to lose 6 in a row, and we just didn't match that. And give Iowa State credit, they played probably their best game of the year.
I do believe Ohio State's a lot better than their Big Ten record shows. They just seem more talented, more athletic, with Sensabaugh and with McNeil and with Suing and with Zed Key. And they've lost some close games. They lost to Fred Hoiberg's Huskers the other night prior to the Chris Street tribute. So you knew this was going to be a tough game. And, of course, going on the road to a pretty lively atmosphere for a team that was dealing with a 5-game losing streak. Now, with that being said, let's transition this a bit to Iowa and giving up 93 points. And this was not a result. The 93, Gary, was not a result of a bunch of free throws at the end of this game.
No.
This was a true 93. Do you want to guess what? I have the official box score. Do you want to guess what Ohio State shot in the second half?
I bet it was in the 60s.
65%.
Yeah.
How do you explain? I had somebody during the game, and I know this is a bit hyperbolic and we live in the moment, and so I understand that. But I had a friend text me during the game saying this is maybe the worst defense I've ever seen this team play. I don't know that I can pinpoint a performance earlier this season that was as poor on that end. Is Ohio State just that difficult to guard, Gary?
No. In fact, in their 5-game losing streak, they only scored 70 or more one time. Everything else was in the 60s. So they're basically scoring 25 or 30 more points than they've been scoring in the last 5 or 6 games. They had 50 points in the paint. I mean, that's an absurd number of points. And they had 18 layups made. That's 36 points just on layups. They were 18 of 28 from the free throw line. So when you take their points in the paint and then you take their threes, they were 8 of 16 from 3. That's 24 points. And they made 13 free throws. That's 87 of their 93 points. So they only scored 3 baskets that were 2-point jump shots outside the paint. And that's, you couple that with 14 turnovers, and that's how you get beat, especially on the road. That's how you get beat soundly.
One of the reasons I have enjoyed doing the show with you over the past 2 seasons, Gary, is because I do take, and the same with Coach Patterson, but I take certain things that ring true to me. And as I watch college basketball, I kind of look at games differently. And so when I'm looking at a defense's performance, whether you're in zone or whether you're in man-to-man, I'm thinking, okay, how many layups and dunks versus how many threes? And yeah, I mean, the first half, I remember saying Ohio State shot in the first half, they shot just 47%. So still pretty good, but it got worse. But in that first half, I thought, okay, open three, open three, open three, dunk, layup, open three, open three, open. I mean, I don't know that I've seen worse 3-point defense in the second half, but then, as you said, the 50 points in the paint, that is an astounding number. 87 of your 93 points scored were either in the paint or behind the arc. I hope that this is a game, and this is the frustrating thing for Iowa fans. We have seen this play out before. It seems like every year you get a couple of performances that were just worse than your typical performance, and it's frustrating from an Iowa standpoint because, as somebody else messaged this to me during the game, according to Ken Palm, Iowa is on pace now to be to have not finished with a top 80 defense for the 7th straight year under Fran. So there's frustrations there. And I know, we've been celebrating the 4-game winning streak, but I think some fans wonder, Gary, how can these things continue? How can you have this bad a performance this far into a tenure? I understand it's a long season. You're going to have off games, but Iowa has the tendency to have these historically bad defensive performances on a year in, year out basis. Why does that happen?
Well, it's a good question. I don't know if I have an exact answer for it. Not being around the program every day, but it's what you emphasize, and we've talked about it before. Coaches are going to coach where they're comfortable, where their strengths are, and I have felt that Iowa over the past couple of years has gotten better.
I agree.
With their half-court defense, and I think that's gone along with them having even more successful years. There's a lot of new guys this year, and we talked about they're a work in progress, especially on the defensive end. And I'm sure they're working at it. They haven't gotten there yet, and they've got to get after it because it's real hard to go on the road and play defense like that and win. It's almost impossible. And then when you throw in they're very uncharacteristic 14 turnovers on top of. They score 77 points with 14 turnovers. You've got no chance. So, they're going to have to address that and improve on that quickly because they're going to go play an even better team in Michigan State in a few days.
Ohio State's bench outscoring the Iowa bench 28-14. Ohio State's been adjusting their lineup. I know McNeil's dealing with a dental issue, which I think is what kept him out of the starting lineup today. But he came in and made a couple of big threes. Again, identifying shooters seems to be an issue. How much zone did Iowa play today?
Oh, they played a fair amount. A lot of times that zone, they match up a lot in it. And so it looks kind of like a man, but it's okay. You watch guys cut through and they don't go with them. It's a zone. It's a matchup zone. And you're right. They got some communication problems where they left guys open or ran two guys to the ball and left another guy open. And so they weren't real sharp on the defensive end in either defense. So, open threes. And the problem is then you get some confidence and then you're a much better, you're a better shooter than you probably are. And Ohio State's a decent 3-point shooting team, but they're not a 50% 3-point shooter. Well, who is? 50% from three is a bad number. I mean, they were 8 for 16, so that's 24 points on 16 possessions. You can figure that out. We usually feel if you can hold a team to less than 1 point per possession, you got a chance to win the game. You got a good chance to win the game. Well, they scored 24 points on 16 possessions. That's well above one. And then you throw in the 18 of 28 layups, and you can see that their points per possession were probably close to 1.5, and that's how you get beat.
With the exception being the game at Ohio State in February 2021, Iowa shot 10 of 24 in that matchup. The four meetings in the last 5 years, I should say, last 6 years, the four meetings beside the 21 game, Iowa has shot 29% from three in Columbus. Ironically enough, they shot 11 of 24 today from three. I think that's maybe part of the frustration on my end here is offensively, Iowa was just fine. I mean, made 11 threes on the road. And you kind of
you throw in the 14 turnovers, you throw in a couple of more than a couple of chances around the basket where they did not finish, and they could have probably scored 92. But the turnovers and not finishing around the basket, they didn't lose the game on the offensive end. You score 77 on the road, you think you got a pretty good chance to at least be competitive and have a chance to win.
Ohio State turned the ball over 11 times. Not the cleanest game for them either. 6 turnovers combined in the first 90 seconds in this game. Is that a record? I don't know that I've ever seen. I think that's
little
insane.
sloppy early. Yeah.
Obviously, I thought a big stretch in this game, Gary. At the end of the first half, it's 37-35. It seemed like forever. And Fran went with a lineup of Ulis, Bowen, Perkins, Connor, and Rebraca. And it just felt like, I said it verbally. I said this out loud at the end of that first half. Okay, you're down 2. If you can at least get this tied or maybe even take a 1 or 2 point lead, to me, you have a totally different mindset heading into the second period. But I don't typically question Fran on lineups, but that lineup frustrated me because you don't have any scoring really in the backcourt, any consistent threat from the backcourt. And then you got Connor playing the 4 and Rebraca at the 5. Obviously, Rebraca's a threat, but correct me if I'm wrong, Gary. Rebraca becomes far less effective when Sanfort's not on the floor, when Dix is not on the floor, because besides Connor, none of those other guards have a reputation of being able to shoot the 3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I would agree with that. Yep. But the bottom line is that it was their defense that cost them the game. I don't, especially in the second half. I bet 3/4 of Ohio State's turnovers were in the first half. They took did a much better job of taking care of the ball in the second, and that's where they blew the game open.
Yeah, 11 total turnovers for Ohio State in the game, and I can tell you the second half stats, just 3. Good call here. Just 3 turnovers in the second half for the Buckeyes, and they ran away with this game. Appreciate the super chat from Lemansky. Says energy and effort looked very low. How did, if any, did the Wildcat postponement leak into this loss? Hurts knowing that we have 5 players that are juniors and seniors. Let's address the first part of that question first, Gary, or the first part of the comment. You mentioned the Northwestern loss, and I said it when it happened. Boy, you hate having a postponement when you're on a 4-game winning streak, and a postponed game that was at home against a Northwestern team that's good, might be a tournament team, but a game I think Iowa would have won. I'm just guessing. I think they would have won that game at home. You're talking about a 5-game winning streak and keeping that momentum going with a quick turnaround against Ohio State. How much of that do you think played into the issues on defense?
I think it might have affected a little bit. It's it's hard. On one hand, it's nice to have a rest and get people some chance to get off their feet and things like that. But then when you're playing well and you're on a roll, you really don't want it then. For example, the Penn State team came in and played Wisconsin on a roll, and they'd had a week off, and they just didn't look the same that they had the games before. It's impossible to replicate game-like condition in practice. And so you're just a little bit off. And I thought Iowa was a little bit off the whole game today. And I agree. I don't think they matched Ohio State's effort. They were the more desperate team, having lost 5 games. And I don't think it was bad, but I don't think it was equal to what Ohio State brought forth. I don't know what the rebounding totals were, but I'm guessing they probably out-rebounded us by about 10-2. And that's an effort stat.
I can tell you that number as well. 36-29, the Buckeyes
7
winning that category. Yeah. So how many, I mean, this is a dumb question, but I don't know that that's included in a box score, but is there a stat that indicates how many stops a team gets, like clean stops? Because it seemed like every time they shot 65% from the field in the second half, but it seemed like on most possessions when they missed, they still got an offensive rebound and found a way to score. I mean, you can probably count on 2 hands the number of stops Iowa had in the second half total.
Yeah, there were. Well, how many points did they score?
Well, let's see. What I can find the number here. Second half points, 56.
Yeah, that's a lot of points. 56 is a lot of points.
Points.
They didn't get many stops. We'll put it that way. Or got fouled, and then they make the free throws. So yeah, 56 is a lot.
Is there? And we're going to get to our callers here in a second. But one more thing before we get to anybody else's questions, Gary. I remember after the Eastern Illinois game, after the Nebraska game, and you doubled down on this team and said, let's give this team time, right? Time to practice. I mean, they've had guys out. Chris has been out. Connor's been out. And I think it's fair to say you were right. They go on a 4-game winning streak, and they're right now, according to Joe Lunardi, they're comfortably in the tournament. And is it fair to say that maybe that's what they needed at the time, right? They needed to be awoken in some way. Is it fair to maybe say that this bad of a defensive loss could end up being what the team needs? Is that a weird way of looking at this?
Well, you hope so. I mean, that's the only way to look at it. I mean, you watch it on tape and you see it. Say, hey, that's not going to get it done against anybody in the Big Ten. Especially in the second half. And so that's where you got to have some accountability. Look in the mirror. Hey, what can I do to get better? And what can we do collectively as a team to get better? Because it wasn't good enough. And I'm sure the coaches and the players feel the same way. I mean, it's not rocket science. They just didn't get it done on the defensive end. And usually on the road, when you get beat, a lot of times that'll be the case. Sometimes you just can't make a basket, but if your defense can keep you in there, then maybe you got a shot. But in this case, scoring wasn't a problem. It was stopping the other team from scoring. And once you get on a roll, it makes it even that more difficult to stop them. So I'm sure there'll be some emphasis on that heading into Michigan State, because I think Michigan State's a better offensive team than Ohio State. So they've got a challenge ahead of them.
Yeah, that's a scary thought. Now here, I want to get to Doug, but I want to make sure we give attention to our sponsor before Doug. I want to thank Brad Van Meter and his team down at State Farm in Des Moines. Call him and his team at 515-256-6480. Not on the weekend, though. Those guys they deserve a couple of days off. You can visit him online at www.bradvanmeter.com. Of course, they offer renter's insurance, life insurance, auto insurance, all kinds of different options from the largest auto insurance company in the country. They've been in business since 99, and they're sponsoring the postgame show. Visit them in person down on Fleur Drive in Des Moines. Thank you to Brad and his team for sponsoring. And, of course, Iowa Floor Covering, they're up in the corner. Their logo, check their stuff out as well. All of our sponsors are listed in our description below. We're going to try to keep the calls somewhat short today, folks, because I want to spend the most time talking and being able to actually break this down with Coach Close. So if you can, to our callers, if we can keep our calls to 1 or 2 questions, the max, that will help us to kind of move forward concisely. Let's get to Doug first. Doug, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's nice to talk to you guys again.
Good to talk to you too.
Sir. Yep. The thing that's really frustrating for me, the 93 points is frustrating. And I'll get more into my 90s nostalgia here in a second, but is that we always seem to have a guy that goes off on us, like Pickett or Howard. And today, I don't know. I think the guy had his career high today. I don't know. But we always seem to have a guy that goes off on us. And I was just thinking of Dennis Rodman. He was my favorite player back in the 90s. And I really liked those Bulls teams. He would guard Reggie Miller. He would guard Karl Malone. He always was on the best player. We don't have a defensive stopper. Fran doesn't recruit that guy. Fran doesn't seem to want to recruit that guy. I always remember Red Auerbach's thing he said about Bill Russell. He was getting criticized for drafting Bill Russell. He goes, the guy only had 10 points in the last game. Well, Red Auerbach says, well, the other team only had 40, meaning, he had that much impact on the game. And I just don't see that we have – I don't know who the best defensive player in the Fran era has been, and he doesn't recruit a defensive stopper. I mean, it just always seems like somebody has a career high against us, and I don't know who we would put on these guys like Pickett or Howard to stop them. I guess my question is, who's our best defender, and how? I mean, is it just pride? Is it somebody isn't a good defender? Maybe we shouldn't have somebody on the floor. I mean, even if they score points, if you're a liability on the other end, maybe you shouldn't be playing. I don't know.
Well, you made a lot of good points. I think first off, I can almost say 95%, maybe more, kids that come in from high school can't play defense. And so you've got to develop it. You got to teach it. They got to get better at it. They don't have enough time at the high school level to really work at it. And every once in a while, you'll come across somebody that just likes to play it and is pretty good. But it takes work to develop defensive player. They played a lot of zone today, and you're talking about the sensible kid. That kid is the highest rated player in the Big Ten in terms of the NBA draft. He is in the mock drafts. He's the first guy going. So there's a lot of people that like his game. He got very comfortable today. I'd love to go back and chart. I'm going to guess most of his threes came against the zone. I'm not sure about that, but anytime you play zone, you're vulnerable to giving up threes. And I was a little shorthanded, and so I think that's part of the reason why they're playing more zone. And it has been effective at times. They just don't have the bodies to keep playing man as much as they would. But even their zone today gave up a lot of penetration. You'd think with zone, you wouldn't give up much penetration. You might give up some threes, but if you're giving up both, that's a real problem. So they've got work to do on that end. And I think the coaches would agree with that. They took a step back today defensively.
Let me give you a hot take real quick, Gary. You're probably going to totally disagree with it based on what you just said about high school kids. Here's a hot take, and Doug, I want to see if you agree with it. I think that some certain players that have played under Fran have actually regressed defensively as their careers have went on. And I say that, I'm talking like, I hate to even call people out, but like Joe Wieskamp, I remember his freshman year thinking, hey, that kid can really play defense. By his senior year, I'm thinking, why can't Joe Wieskamp play defense? And maybe that's just me as a fan, how I'm expecting more from a guy who's an upperclassman. I would say the same thing about Tony Perkins. He got here in his freshman year. He got on the court by means of his defense. Same with Aaron Eulis. And now it's like neither of those guys, what you just said, Doug, to me is true. I don't know that either of those guys are strong on the defensive end. Josh Dix seems like he's defensively a lot better than I thought he would be. Am I wrong on this, Doug? You're nodding your head. Do you see the same thing as I do?
Well, I was just thinking of CJ, even Fredericks. A lot of these guys, they kept on talking about CJ was a great defensive stopper in his redshirt year, and he was on it. That was the reason why they got rid of Isaiah Moss, was to get CJ in there because he was a better defensive player. And it just doesn't seem like these guys do any defensive drills. I mean, I'm not trying.
On my implication in this, Gary, and I want to get your opinion on it because you're probably going to tell me I'm wrong. But my thought on this is, I'm just theorizing here. Although maybe kids out of high school aren't taught defense certainly to the level that they need at the Big Ten level, I'm wondering if, as freshmen, guys are just giving more effort on that into the court because they know that's how they get on the floor, is by being able to offer something on that end. And once they're established into the rotation, it's just not emphasized enough in practice. And so they just get comfortable. I mean, there were times today where guys aren't even getting back in transition. We're just jogging up the court. And I know Ohio State didn't have many transition points, so that was the least of their problems on that end. But am I wrong on this, Gary?
Yeah, well, your defense starts protecting the rim. That's whether you're in full court pressure or half court, you gotta design it to stop people from getting to the rim, because that's the easiest shot at basketball. And they got 28 layups today. I mean, that's an unheard of number. I mean, you're not going to win giving up 28 layups, and that's not even counting probably going in there and getting fouled. That's probably where they got most of their fouls, was off of that. So it just causes all kinds of problems. But I will say this: defense is hard to play. I think a lot of people think, well, hey, you just got to go out there and be a tough guy and play hard. It's more than that. It's a very team oriented thing. You have one guy that's screwing up on the defensive end, chances are your defense is going to break down. Not all the time, and certainly you have a couple, that's going to be the case. So I think any coach will tell you defense usually is behind the offense, because it takes work. And then when you got people coming in out of the lineup, and that just retards the development. So they've got work to do there. I think everybody would agree to that, and hopefully this will send a message that, hey, if we're going to do something this year, we got to play better than that, or our goals are going to have to be lowered. There's no way they can play like that and win a lot of games.
Any thought on my theory of players regressing as their career goes on at Iowa in that area?
I don't know. Maybe I don't. That doesn't jump out at me, but because I really felt the last couple of years they've gotten better defensively.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's beyond
part
that.
Part of that, in my opinion, Gary, has been some of the. I mean, we're talking the Murray twins, right, and their athleticism. I mean, these last 2 years, Chris was a freshman, Chris was a sophomore, Keegan was a freshman, Keegan was a sophomore. So that's what I'm saying. I think personnel-wise to me, I'm not saying that maybe Fran hasn't made some adjustments in practice, but I've attributed most of their success defensive, and I say success with a grain of salt because it's all relative. But their relative success on that end, I think, has been more so personnel-based. They've had more athletic one-on-one defenders like Tony Perkins, like Aaron Eulis, like the Murray twins. Whereas when you had Bohannon, Wieskamp, Garza, Frederick, guys who just didn't have the athleticism, and then they're not being taught. Not everybody can be Wisconsin, Gary. You guys taught defense with a bunch of white dudes that weren't very athletic. No offense, but that's just the reality. I mean, isn't that kind of the reality of?
Sam Decker was pretty good.
You know what I'm talking about, Doug.
Yeah.
Bo Ryan, and you guys taught defense to a bunch of white guys who weren't very athletic, and you were great at doing it, but they had to be taught because they weren't going to be able to live and die off athleticism or lack thereof. When Iowa is unathletic, like they were at times with the Garza era, even as great as he was, as great as Bohannon was, their defense was really bad. It got better when they had better personnel, but to me, it's starting to regress again. Doug, you're an avid Iowa fan. Do you agree with that sentiment?
It's just Fran, and it's the way it's been for the 13 years. I mean, I remember the year they went 14-19, Garza's freshman year. They had a lot of games like this.
Couldn't
a lot
stop
of games.
Anybody.
Yeah. I mean, they could score, and they've always been able to score. The two stats I always say with Iowa, if they don't win, is they got to make 10 threes, and they got to hold the other team under 70. And if they do those two things, they win like 99% of the time. You're not going to win any games if you just allow 93 points. Again, like I said, I'm a JV All-Star. I played hard on defense. I always tried to jump the ball, and I was always on help. But a lot of those things, I think they know those things. Those are simple concepts that you learn in 7th and 8th grade. I just think that they don't put the emphasis and don't work on it that much, I don't
even think that's up for debate. I think that's what Gary said is exactly right. It's just what you're prioritizing. And I think my biggest frustration has been, okay, all these years later, like you've had relative success, but it's kind of like Iowa football. And it's a different situation, but like, don't you realize that if you maybe brought in somebody who could prioritize this, or you found a way to more so prioritize, do you really believe that's going to hurt your offense so much that you can't still make it a positive gain? Like, to me, I don't understand how all these years later that has not been instilled with the Iowa basketball coaching staff, that if we put more emphasis on defense, we're elite on offense every single year. We can actually make a push. I mean, it's different because we measure Iowa basketball success so much differently than Iowa football success. But I think they're kind of the same animal in a way. You're so elite on one end and so bad on the other end that you're just stuck between a rock and a hard place. And that's what grows the level of frustration with the fan base. So anyways, anything else, Doug, before we let you slide?
Just, these two road games, I want people to stay positive. These are two tough places to play. Then we get 3 home games. Let's judge the season after Illinois. Like I said, I take one game at a time, even as a fan. I think, this was just that guy went off on us, and they played well, and they were desperate, and let's just hope that we can get Michigan State. But even if we don't, Rutgers is a big game. That's a home game. Hopefully, we get a sellout. So again,
yeah.
Thank you, Doug.
Thanks, Doug.
And the bottom line is, I don't want to, it sounds like I'm being hard on on Fran and the defense as a whole. But even in this last four game winning streak, I said several times, Gary, I said this. I said several times, at some point, this defense is still going to bite them because it wasn't good against Michigan. It was okay against Rutgers, but Rutgers isn't a very good offensive team, right? They just don't shoot they just don't shoot very well. Is how I would sum it up. And against Maryland, I thought their defense was okay. Against Indiana, it was really, really bad early. And it was better as the game went on, but it still wasn't very good. They just outscored them.
Yeah.
At some point, you're going to lose games. I mean, you win 4 straight, but at some point, you're going to lose games if your defense isn't very good. So I don't know how else to.
This was one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Let's move on to. So Hawkeyes in the chat says, you think we need a big now? I wouldn't place this on the shoulders of Filip Rebraca, if that's the implication here. I mean, he's been really good all year. Now, he's had a couple of games now where he's struggled a bit. And I said heading into this game, my key to this game, Gary, was the Rebraca-Zed Key matchup. And I was kind of afraid of Rebraca getting into foul trouble. And he really didn't. He avoided foul trouble, got a foul call somewhat early in the game and stayed away from that second. But Zed Key, I would say, won this matchup today. 11 points for Zed, 9 rebounds. And Rebraca, I mean, he had 15 points and 3 boards, but it just seemed like the physical. I mean, you talk about points in the paint. Zed Key was a big part of that.
Yeah, he certainly was a part of it, no doubt. But it was all the way around. It wasn't just one guy. You don't shoot 28 layups and score 50 points in the paint with just one guy. It's a lot of guys attacking the basket, and I'm guessing that was an emphasis in their scouting report that we've got to attack the rim and make them take that away, and they really never did.
All right, let's get to Ryan, who's on the phone. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Hey, gentlemen, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
So, got a few things to say. As far as the game today, you cannot give up 56 points in the second half and have any chance. Looking at Iowa's overall offense numbers, 45% from the field, we looked pretty good. If you only looked at the offensive side of things, the 28 layups on top of 50% from 3, you don't have a chance. And, this was the kind of game that I think we all kind of feared in the preseason when we're talking, hey, when we get to the Big Ten, we could have some problems with such and such. Ohio State with those bigs, that Sensball's the best player in the conference, period. Absolutely. That guy is awesome. I can understand why he's the number 1 player for NBA. And then, and I agree with you, Corey, it has nothing to do with Filip Rebraca. He's been a beast all year. But you want to talk about the Fran years where we actually were somewhat capable, pretty solid at defense. It was when we had Utah, but most importantly, Woodbury and Gabe Olashany. I mean, they were rim protectors.
No, Anthony Clemens was a big part of that.
And Anthony Clemens on the guards. But what I was kind of talking about was rim protectors. But yeah, from the perimeter, Anthony Clemens. Like I think we're giving up mid 60s, maybe late 60s per game and only scoring 75 or so. But now if you want to talk what was our best season under Fran, I guess you'd have to say Garza's senior year because we were a 2 seed. We all know how that turned out. But, it was a very, very good team where you had a chance every night, I think is the best way I can say it. We've had Gazelle was your point guard with Clemens, and he wasn't super fast, not a good free throw shooter in the clutch, but he was an all-around good point guard. And that's how we were able to beat good defensive teams like Wisconsin.
Ryan, we didn't really beat Wisconsin much during those years, Ryan. Gary knows that firsthand. We didn't really beat
Gary knows 10 years ago yesterday we did. 10 years ago yesterday we did.
Well, so yes, we did. But here's what I want to say. Ryan brings up a fair point, and I want to ask you this question, Gary. You were on the other side of this. You were coaching for Wisconsin, but Iowa was better defensively during the Woodbury, Gasell, Clemens, even into the Utah era. They were just better. I mean, even like Ken Palm says, they were substantially better. At like top 60, top 50 in Ken Palm defensive efficiency. What made them better? Would you attribute it to what Ryan said about rim protection, or was that just you had better? I mean, what made that team better?
It was probably more talent. I mean, we always talk about talent on the offensive end, and we don't talk about it on the defensive end. Like he had mentioned, maybe they had some good guys that did do a better job of protecting the rim, better guys containing the ball out on the perimeter. That's where it starts. I mean, if you're giving up dribble penetration, your defense is going to break down pretty quickly if you're doing that consistently. And so I would guess probably it was probably a personnel factor more than anything.
I agree.
Ryan, anything else?
Yeah, just two really quick things. I had the honor of my 14 and 11-year-old watching the Chris Street special on the 18th. My 11-year-old wore his Iowa shirt to school and was telling all his friends about Chris Street. Mm-hmm. My 14-year-old met Mike and Patty at Carver and remembered their faces. And then, Coach, I warned my boys ahead of time that there were going to be some tears, and I had some Kleenex nearby. And I don't know how, I never met the guy as much as I just absolutely love him, and my whole family knows he's a big part of me. My Facebook picture is Street 40. That being said, Coach, I don't know how you do it, how you get through it. You did a great job on the special. You honor him the way he should be honored. And then the last thing I'm just going to say is I got some bad news this week. An Iowa State fan and season ticket holder who I've actually been really close friends with for 23 years and lives in Indianola, loves Chris Street, even though every single time we play, I get messages back and forth from him, and we talk about life and everything else, yada, yada. I texted him about a half hour before the Chris Street special just to remind him it was going to be on, and he never responded. I get home from work yesterday to find out he had a massive heart attack and passed away, 70 years old. Mm-hmm. He was a mentor, and he admitted to me that he will root for Iowa every time if they're not playing Iowa State. And he was a wonderful man. And, waking up this morning and seeing the Big Ten Network replay of the Chris Street special, an hour and a half, it started before the Iowa game, still with that weighing on me. It's been a tough day. So,
sorry.
Coach, I know. Thank you so much, Corey. And Coach, I just really want to say, tip of the cap for how you've always represented the greatest Hawkeye of all time, Chris Street. Thank you, sir.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Ryan. Oh, hold on. Ryan, go ahead.
Fly, Eagles, fly. You got that right.
Did you play tonight? I was going to end the show by saying "Go Eagles" just for you, Gary. Can we just talk briefly about the Chris Street special? Did it exceed your expectations? Was it about what you expected? Obviously, it was very well done.
It was really well done. Yeah, I was really pleased with the whole production and how it came off, and I thought they portrayed him very well. And Matt Engel was the guy that did it, and he did it. He did a lot of work, and he deserves a lot of credit. It was well done.
Phil Parker's pa says, "Coach, would you leave Perkins and Ulis out there together like Fran is? It seems like a bad pairing. Just my opinion."
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I don't know if he's got a whole lot of choice, just from a lack of depth. I think Ulis is playing better than he has been playing. He's showing some signs of improving, and Perkins always had a wonderful game the other night. So I think you've got to go with them, and then you get those other guys in there when you can. And I think that's the cards that you got to play.
What Iowa has on its side as it relates to tournament resume, this is a step back, but it's not a big step back, right? I mean, losing on the road at an Ohio State team, who I think Ohio State's got a pretty decent shot at being a tournament team. If they can get back to around 500 in this conference, and I think they can probably do that. They've lost a lot of games by slim margins. How about TCU today? Walloping, that's the word that Ari Gold used, walloping Kansas in Lawrence by, I think, 20 plus. And now, Gary, I mean, TCU was a loss, but that's certainly not a bad loss at all.
No, not at all.
Seton Hall got a big win. Who did they beat the other day?
Yeah, they beat UConn or somebody like that.
UConn. They beat UConn. Big win for Seton Hall. I believe they're now a quad 1 win. Clemson's rolling. They got one loss. It was to Wake Forest the other day. Iowa State is what did they win today? They
were winning.
They were winning. Let me pull that number up real quick, just as a frame of reference here. Iowa State fell. They lost to Oklahoma State 61-59, but that's still a really good win for Iowa. The resume is still in pretty good shape. I mean, Lunardi's got Iowa as a 7 seed right now, Gary.
Yeah. Those things I have no idea. But they usually are pretty accurate. So, like any fan, I take a look at them every once in a while myself.
And I sent you the other day, I sent you a screenshot of Lunardi's bracketology as of this past week. And I was just blown away by the fact he's got 10 teams in his tournament. And then an 11th team in, I believe, his first 4 out.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah.
Isn't that insane?
Yeah, and then we got 2 teams in the top 25, and maybe only 1 after this week. What it does is, you see a lot of teams that are in that right there at the end, bubble teams that they've got to keep winning, or that could change. But right now, it looks like they got a bunch in. So, credit to the league.
Lunardi has he does 16, or excuse me, not isn't it 16? Yeah, 16 bubble teams. Of course, last 4 buys, last 4 in, first 4 out, next 4 out. Of those 16 teams, 5 of those teams are Big Ten teams.
Yeah. So that'll have a big effect. Yep.
Absolutely. Yep. Let's get to Tony, who I know follows the tournament discussion way early. Tony, welcome to the show.
How you doing? I said I was a man of my word, and if we lost today, my 5-0 record prediction does not count, and fell just a game short of that 5-0 that I thought we were going to get. So I'm going
to give you a pass though, because the Northwestern postponement. I think you would have been right had they played on Wednesday, and that's frustrating to say, but I think that's the reality of it.
Coach has touched on it, and this was probably one of, if not the most desperate teams right now in the country. They go, I think, what was it? They popped up their next 2 are on the road, like Illinois and Indiana. Like, their backs were as against the wall as you possibly could get. A 5-game skid, 2 tough away games that are staring them in the face if they don't win this one. And that 5-game skid could have easily turned into an 8-game skid. Now, I'm not, our effort wasn't there today, plain and simple. But I do want to say something that I believe Ohio State's the best team offensive-wise metrics that we faced this year. So this was not a slouch of an offense. They looked horrible during that 5-game losing streak. But metrics-wise, I think Ken Palm has some top 10 in the nation in offense. So I'm not defending the horrible defense. Ohio State.
Okay.
So I'm saying, like, us giving up 93, I don't think is as bad as some people are making it out to me. This was an efficient offensive team we faced.
They weren't scoring. Gary just said this.
They weren't. No. In that, of course, that's why they lost the games, because they weren't scoring. But averages work themselves out, and this was a game where they needed. And
Tony, if that's the mindset that if Fran goes in the locker,
I don't think he has that. No.
This is a good offensive team we play, so we better hope that he's not preaching that to the team.
He's not. I hope he's not either. I don't want him to. I'm just trying to provide some levity here that I don't think this is as bad. we're probably going to have the same result against Michigan State, but that's life on the road in the Big Ten.
I think they'll play better.
I think they'll play better too. I don't see them repeating this. I don't.
Well, I meant result, not effort. I think we're going to have the same result. I unfortunately think we're going to lose that game, but I think the effort will be better.
But I think the effort on the defensive end will be better. They may not shoot as well. I mean, Iowa shot again 11 made threes today on the road. They may not make. They probably won't make 11 at Michigan State.
No.
And Michigan State's really good. Gary, can you talk about the Spartans?
Yeah, they are. It's a relatively young team, but they're getting better and better. They've won at Wisconsin. They've got some. They got some good guys. They beat Michigan. They almost beat Purdue. That went right down to the last possession. So they're one of the top, 2-3 teams in the league probably, and probably will end up that way. Sometimes the schedules skew that a little bit. I don't know exactly who they play and don't play, and then when you play them there, their record there speaks for themselves. So, needless to say, they're going to have to play a lot better to beat a better offensive team, in my opinion, in Michigan than Ohio State, although maybe your numbers prove me wrong, but certainly a challenge.
And to Ari Gold, he says, Corey, if the Hawks don't make the tourney, does Fran get another pass? Ari Gold, if you count the year where they were going to be probably a 4 or 5 seed when the tournament they've been in the tournament 4 straight years. So don't give me this nonsense about, you're giving them a pass. They have made the tournament for 4 straight years. You can ridiculous. We want to talk about Sweet 16 results. That's fine, but give me a break. Tony?
They also haven't something about how many years in a row they finished in the top 4. Because, I mean, one of the years they were a 5 seed. Like, I think they were a 5 seed in the Big Ten tournament, but they were tied for 4th. Like, Fran they finished in the top 4 of the conference. I don't know how many years in a row.
Yeah, I mean, and, they had the 2 – basically they've had – since Fran reestablished this program, I would say – I mean, they were NIT runners-up in the 2013. But since it was really reestablished as a tourney team in the 2013-2014 season, they've had one dip. One dip. That was when they narrowly missed the tournament in 2017, went to the NIT, and then they had the miserable 2017-2018 season. That's it in the Fran era. That they have been basically, since they've been established, they've been a perennial tournament team. Now, the Sweet 16 argument is a different argument, but don't give me if you don't make the tournament. They have made the tournament consistently under Fran McCaffrey. Whether that's enough or not, that's a different discussion.
I do want to thank Coach for taking this time out to be a part of that Chris Street special. That was, as everyone has echoed, that was a great job that the Big Ten Network did. It was a shame we couldn't play that night, but January 31st is the makeup, and that's the anniversary of when we had our first home game after, correct? Am I remembering that right?
That's a good question. You might be right on that.
Because I think they had 9 days off. Does that sound right? After
9 days off before the Michigan State game, yeah, and then we had a couple more before Michigan. So I think it was the 31st. I think you might be right.
So hopefully we can get a good tribute for them in then, and they kind of do that. I don't have much else to say. It's frustrating. And to me, it almost felt like what is that picture you see where the person, is it Lucy that has the hand out that you just can't get close enough? It felt like they were there, then Ohio State put the hand out. They just couldn't. Yeah,
the second half. Every time they scored, he said, "Well, they're not."
It was just.
I got, and Gary's going to say, "Well, it's because you're a pessimist." Well, with Iowa basketball and the defense, and Iowa football and the offense, I am. But in that entire second half, Gary, Iowa would score, and I'd say, "Oh, they're not going to get a stop." And time after time after time, Ohio State came right back and scored.
There weren't many consecutive stops, to say the least. Yeah, maybe none.
I don't think there were any in that second half. Would be my guess.
Yeah.
And the defense did drop to 140th in Ken Palm.
That's unbelievable.
Bad. No,
that is unbelievable. I mean, as great as this comeback of the last 4 games have been, that is an unbelievable. They are 140th in Ken Palm. Yeah. I'm guessing there is no Big Ten team worse. Is that fair to say in Ken Palm, Tony? You have it up in front of you.
I do, and incorrect, actually, Minnesota, but I don't think they count.
Well, Minnesota, they are right now.
Yeah, I don't think if you're using the teams, of the top 13, Iowa's 141 and Minnesota's 147. But the next
Minnesota beat Ohio State at Ohio State.
Yeah. The next closest team is Michigan in the 80s. So it's a 60.
That's the next closest team is
80.
Yeah,
it's not good.
I know Fran obviously doesn't care about Ken Palm, because if he cared about Ken Palm, this would be fixed by now. But anyways, we can move on, Tony.
Thanks for your time.
We'll see you. Thanks for the call.
We'll see you Thursday.
Thursday? We'll see you
Thursday.
6 p.m. tip-off.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I'm sorry that this game got me riled up today, Gary. So
I think so.
So, anyways, let me see. I know I missed a comment here in the chat from actually Ari Gold. Good comment here. He brings up the next 5 games. That's a tough stretch of games, Gary.
That's a tough stretch of games.
But there isn't any non-tough stretch of games in this conference.
No, not unless you can play Minnesota back to back. I agree, and that's not going to happen. So, yep. No, that's a bear. There's no question. That's going to be a challenge. Those 2 road games are maybe the 2 best teams in the league, and Rutgers might be the 3rd best team. They got them, and so yeah, they got they got some work to do.
For a team like Iowa, would you rather be in a position where you have a Minnesota on the schedule twice, which they don't, by the way, they play them once, but would you rather have a team like Minnesota that are sure conference wins, or would you rather have more opportunities at good wins like what Iowa has?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess it would depend upon how good my team is. Because, it's one thing to get a lot of good wins, another thing to get some momentum going by getting some wins, period. So it's amazing how often that race comes down to the schedule. For example, Wisconsin this year does not play at Michigan State, does not play at Purdue, and does not play at Rutgers. Those might be the 3 best teams in the league, certainly 3 of the top 5 maybe, and maybe 3 of the toughest places to play on the road. So that's an advantage.
So what you're telling me is Wisconsin will probably finish 2nd in the Big Ten race.
Well, they might for a lot of reasons, but the schedule certainly does help them. But I mean, they're a good team too. But when you don't have to play at those 3 places, that's a break.
Appreciate the super chat from Lemansky, and he gives you a shout out here, Gary. He says, "Shout out to Gary. You will always be a Hawkeye." Let's get to our caller who's on the phone line. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame with Coach Gary Close. Who's on the line?
Good afternoon, gentlemen. This is John.
Hey, John.
Hi, John.
I was at the Maryland game, and I think you were too, Coach Close. But
yes,
in the second half, in front of the Maryland bench, there was a turnover, and it involved Peyton and Connor. And Peyton come up, and he was barking at Connor, and Connor barked back at him. And Peyton went over and sat on the bench and was pounding the floor with his fist. Game before that, Brad tore into Tony, and makes me wonder if there isn't some stress in this locker room. Do either one of you gentlemen see any signs of that?
I haven't, especially with the losing streak that they were on prior to this winning streak. When you're around the same guys each and every day and you're pounding one another, that stuff can happen, and that's okay as long as it doesn't fester. I mean, we're all competitive, so I want to beat you, you want to beat me, and so that can happen. But no, I haven't seen it. Now that doesn't mean that I'm right on that, but I have not seen that.
I by the way, I did see John. I did see the exchange between Peyton and Connor. That was actually shown on TV as well.
Did Peyton get a foul on that?
John, do you remember? I don't remember what preceded that exchange.
Because I thought maybe he got a foul
I was sitting on the side of the arena on the bench side, and about halfway up, and I don't think I've seen. I don't remember that. I don't, to be honest with you.
Maybe it's happening behind closed doors, Gary, but it's performances like this on the defensive end where you give up 93, where as a fan, I want to see guys getting after each other on the bench and guys getting in each other's faces, and I didn't see that today. So maybe that will happen. They do have kind of an extended break. I mean, you have Sunday off, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. They don't play till Thursday. So they'll get back home and they'll have time to address these issues. And my guess is you probably get Patrick back for that game at Michigan State. Be my guess. With some of the struggles, I wouldn't be surprised if he feels extra motivation to get back. And you certainly don't want him to rush back, but I wouldn't be surprised if he comes back. And it's an opportunity here with, again, 5 days in between games for these issues to get somewhat resolved.
Yep. No, I agree. I think that would be a welcome addition. Gives us some more depth and length, and it'd be great to see him out on the court for himself.
Anything else, John?
As a coach, just real quick. As a coaching staff, if you have two players in the locker room that don't really care for one another, how do you handle that as a coaching staff so it doesn't bleed over into the rest of the team?
Well, I think like we had talked about, it's we're all competitive, and that's okay. You like to see a little bit of that, and as long as it doesn't get out of hand. And then you got to communicate, hey, what's the deal, and kind of go from there so it doesn't fester. Connor, one of the reasons why Connor has been so successful is he plays with a chip. So I can imagine he's been in a few scuffles with his teammates as well as his opponents. So that's just how he is. And I think his teammates know that. And it's one of the reasons why he's a pretty effective player. So you just can't cross the line. You can be competitive, you can be tough, you can have disagreements, but it can't get to the point where, that it's a detriment to the team. And I haven't seen that. So in fact, I think the chemistry of this team has been good for a number of years. And I think it's one of the reasons why they've been so successful.
Okay. Well, I was just curious about that. Have a good afternoon, gentlemen. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the call.
All right. Did you know, Gary, that Gabe Olashaney and Aaron White are playing on the same team over in Turkey?
I did not.
I didn't either until Tom Kakert just retweeted a highlight between those two. So that's kind of cool to see. Those guys are, I shouldn't say getting old, but they've been playing basketball now for
getting that paycheck for as long as they can.
Yeah. So Olashaney's a guy that I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but Olashaney's a guy that you always wonder if he could have stayed in school another couple of years, because he was a late bloomer, and Franz talked about him. He didn't even really play a lot of basketball in high school.
Right.
You coached against him. I think he could have been special, especially in the Big Ten. Yeah,
he certainly had some tools that would lead you to believe that. Now, if he had the work ethic to go along with it, then you got a chance. So, he had some talent.
Thoughts on Maryland, Gary? I wanted to bring them up because I thought they looked kind of just average against Iowa last week in Carver, and they looked superb against Michigan the other night. And Michigan's kind of a weird team to read as well. But I don't know if you got to watch Maryland, Michigan, but what are your thoughts on the Terrapins right now?
I agree with you. I thought they were very, very average against Iowa. I thought their defense wasn't very good, and they had some bad fouls, and so they were just like Ohio State today. They were a desperate team, and I think they outworked Michigan. And the previous caller mentioned that Michigan has struggled a little bit on the defensive end. So, offensively, it was probably one of their better games. And they're at home, and so they've got some talent. They've been very up and down. I guess you don't want to catch them when they're up, and hopefully you catch them when they're down. But they're a team that you better be ready, because they're certainly capable. They've had some really good wins, and they've had some head scratching losses. And they're going to be in a situation where every game's big for them to try to get themselves on the bubble and past the bubble.
Well, folks, appreciate everybody being here. As a final recap, Ohio State defeating the Iowa Hawkeyes in Columbus 93-77. The Buckeyes snapped Iowa's 4-game winning streak, beat the Hawkeyes in Value City Arena for the first time since 2019. All-America candidate Chris Murray led the Hawkeyes with 22 points, 7 boards. He reached the 20-plus point barrier, a team-best 8th time this season, 10th time in his career. That's Philip Rebracha, totaled 15 points for the, double figures with 15 points for the 12th time in 13 games. Aaron Eulis had 12 points, his second highest point total of the season at 15 against TCU in a loss down in Florida, equal to season high with 2 steals. Eulis also made a 3-pointer in a career-best fourth straight game. So he's been able to make.
He's showing some progress. Yep.
Yeah, the occasional open 3 when he's needed to.
Mm-hmm.
The Hawkeyes made 11 3-pointers despite the loss. And an interesting stat here, they sank 10 or more triples for the 7th time this season and 3rd time in 4 outings. And that's the first time they've lost a game when making at least 9 threes. Of course, the Hawkeyes and the Buckeyes will meet again on February 16th. Let's get to our final caller of the night. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame with Coach Gary Close, who's on the line.
Hi, Corey. It's Ryan. How are you guys doing today?
Good, Ryan. How are you?
Ryan. Thanks for the call.
Very good. Hey, I have a question for you, Coach. I don't really know how to phrase this exactly right, so bear with me, okay?
Sure.
I thinking about the game today. Gosh, how do I say this stuff? I admire Fran because I think he's giving scholarships to Iowa players. Let's just put it like that. Start out with that. And there's a lot of coaches that do not. I mean, they'll come in and they're looking for elite players from wherever they can get them around the country. And that's kind of like point 2 here. And but Iowa, they're trying to win with Iowa guys. And I think during the Chris Street program, which I watched and got a lot more knowledge about, I was curious about Jeff Suttle's statement where, Chris was a guy that kind of showed that Iowa players could compete on a national level. And I thought it was interesting because, today we did not. And we were pretty much exposed really badly. And when I think about Iowa, I'm thinking about, we're 97% white state. And Wisconsin plays a lot of kids that are white also. And that's my question to you, Gary, is what I noticed, and maybe you can explain this, and that's what I'm kind of trying to get to, is how Wisconsin is able to be competitive playing this exceptional defense that they learned under Bo Ryan and Dick Bennett. And that's my only question, and I'll hang up. Thank you.
Yeah. I think first off, I think Jess made a really good point. It's always going to be a challenge for the coach at Iowa to compete against teams like Michigan and Michigan State and Illinois and Ohio State that have a decided advantage from a recruiting standpoint, just because they're in states with bigger populations and more cities and things like that. So you've got to complement your recruiting with taking care of the kids in your state that you feel can play at this level, and then going outside of that area and getting players that you also can think. So it makes it a challenge. I don't think there's any question that from a recruiting standpoint, Iowa's got more challenges than, say, a Michigan State or a Michigan or Ohio State, or literally almost every school with a few exceptions that are kind of in the same boat. Nebraska, Wisconsin, even Minnesota's got, it's got excellent basketball up there, and got, Minneapolis, obviously a big city. As far as your second question about us being competitive, I think first off, and I think Fran does the same thing. We did a decent job, maybe better, of getting kids that would buy into what we were going to teach. And they wanted to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And they wanted to be a part of a team. And it wasn't about them. It was about the team and what can I do to improve the team. And we felt that if we were going to compete with teams like Michigan State and Illinois, the teams that I've mentioned that maybe year in and year out are going to have more talent than us just because of geographical advantages that they've got, that we've got to do a really good job of developing players. And so they've got to get better each and every year. And I think for the most part, we did do that. And then we've got to give our team a chance to win. And like, for example, in this game, when it got to the 2 or 3 minute mark, Iowa did not have a chance to win. The game was pretty much over. You want to get to that part of the game where you at least got a shot. And then if you can make some plays and make some shots, then maybe you can get your share of wins and keep your team competitive. And to do that, we felt you've got to take care of the ball. You just can't waste possessions where you can score. And in a lot of cases, when you turn a ball over, you're giving the other team easy baskets, and it's like a double whammy. And so we worked very hard on not turning the ball over. And I give Fran a lot of credit. I think he saw that too and has done a great job of controlling turnovers, especially at the pace that they play. And then the second thing, we just told them that we have got to be good on the defensive end, because we're not going to be able to outscore teams night in and night out that are more talented than us. And then if we caught a year where we had some talent, like we did in 14 and 15, then you can really do something, which, of course, which we did. So, but I think the big thing was getting players to buy in to what we want. And that's recruiting and doing evaluations and asking a lot of questions and things like that. So, we recruited our state very hard, just like Iowa recruits their state hard. We tried to get some Iowa kids because we felt their background would be just what we were talking about. I know we did a good job of getting into Minnesota when they were down. And I've had a lot of people that have played at Wisconsin that were from Minnesota that had some success, like Jordan Taylor and Jared Bergeron and John Lure. And so that can feed other players like Brad Davison and the big kid Stephen Kroll is from Minnesota. So, we had to go out and find some spots where we could be maybe competitive to complement the players from Wisconsin. So that's kind of how we addressed it, and I think that's part of the reason why we stayed fairly competitive.
What remind me what happened with the Ben Brust situation?
Well, Ben had committed to Iowa with Coach Licklider, I believe.
Okay, and then he got
when
fired.
When the coaching change happened, he
Okay.
opened it back up.
Okay, was that easy, or was he considering sticking with Fran? Do you know?
That's a good question.
Did Fran even?
I know that we had him on campus a lot, and didn't pull the trigger quick enough. I give Coach Licklider credit. He pulled it quicker, and Ben jumped on it. But then when he decided he wanted to look around, we wanted to get involved because we liked him as a player. He had a great senior year, and I think the fact that he had been on campus and had been to some of our camps and things like that, I think that helped us a lot. So he had some familiarity with us that he didn't have with Fran coming in, brand new.
Gary, I know you're not an NBA guy, but how about the Sacramento Kings? They're third in the West right now.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah. Yeah. And he's having a wonderful, wonderful rookie year. And it looks like from everything that he's really enjoying it and likes the team and the coach. And that doesn't always happen. So that's
the reason why Sacramento was able to draft him is because they were bad last year.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So not many rookies get to experience team success like this. I mean, this is incredible. And what else do you point to besides, I know there were they made some changes in the offseason. I get that. But Keegan Murray he's team high 29 points yesterday. That was a career high for Keegan. 29 points, 14 rebounds, 10 of 12 from the field, 5 of 7 from 3, and 4 of 4 from the free throw line.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's big time.
So, congratulations to Keegan, and it'll be interesting. I'll be tore if the Mavs end up playing Sacramento. That will be. I just will love to. You don't get to watch. Sacramento is not a team that ESPN highlights or they get on TNT.
You got to get that NBA pass.
I know the NBA game. Well, the nice thing is I don't really need that because Doncic is always featured on ESPN and TNT. But once we get to the playoffs, all these games will be televised, so it'll be nice to be able to watch,
It will
assuming
be.
they can hang on and make the playoffs. And they're in great position right
And
now.
by the way, he's an Iowa kid, just so people
Absolutely.
realize. And an Iowa kid that wasn't heavily recruited. So you got to give the staff a lot of credit for getting him and developing him.
And let's be honest, Chris Murray, I mean, still scored 22, 7, and 4.
Oh, he's a pro. He'll be a pro too. Yep.
Yeah. One more shout out, folks, to Brad Van Meter and his team down at State Farm. We appreciate the support of Brad throughout the season. He and his team, they're, of course, offering products border to border in the state of Iowa, whether it be auto, home, renters, business, life insurance. They spend countless hours taking care of their customers' insurance needs and meeting annually to review coverages and or make any needed changes. Of course, State Farm celebrated their 100th year of being in business. This team has been in business since 1999. So again, give Brad and his team a chance to serve you in the insurance world, the very complex insurance world out there. Give him a call at 515-256-6480 or visit him online at www.bradvanmeter.com. Whenever I start slurring my speech, it's not because I'm tired or I've had anything to drink. We're over an hour into the show, Gary.
There you go.
Wrap this thing up.
Well, you do a great job.
Well, folks, we'll be back on Thursday, hopefully talking about an Iowa win. If Iowa finds a way to bounce back and get a win at Sparty on Thursday, this will kind of be not forgotten, but all will be okay in Hawkeye world.
Yeah, that if you could split going to those two games, you would have taken it in a heartbeat. I think Coach McCaffrey would have too. You like to win them both, but reality is such that this league, especially on the road, wins are hard to come by.
And playing in this conference is such a fragile thing because, they play at Michigan State. I think most people expect Michigan State to win that game. All of a sudden, you're on a 2-game losing streak heading into a period, like a 6-day period where you play 3 games. So as quick as you got on a 4-game winning streak, things can go the opposite direction. So these next 4 or 5 days of prep for this game against Michigan State, I think are huge.
That's why you got to keep an even keel. You can't get real high when you win. You can't get down in the dumps when you lose, or things can get bad quickly. So you got to learn and, hey, where do we got to get better? And then you got to put it behind you and get ready to go.
All right, folks, for Coach Gary Close, I'm Corey Brada here from the Hawkeye of the Storm Iowa postgame with Coach Gary Close. Go Eagles, Gary, and we'll talk to you Thursday.
All right. Sounds good, Corey.